After the dust settled for Star Wars The Force Awakens, Starries, as they're called, were tentatively waiting for the follow-up to the film. A common conception is that Empire Strikes Back was the best film in the series, improving on A New Hope, and I myself was hoping that Star Wars The Last Jedi would be able to tread newer, fresher waters than the last film. Star Wars The Last Jedi, which was received with critical reviews almost exactly the same as The Force Awakens, and has been a huge box office success, although a little behind The Force Awakens, follows where The Force Awakens left off. After a long-ass stare between each other, it's found that Luke is a lot more apprehensive toward helping Rey than what was hoped. Meanwhile, the Resistance is being thinned and struggles to build momentum. Arguably the most pivotal aspect about this film is the relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey. The film is directed by Rian Johnson, otherwise known for his work on directing the fantastic science fiction film Looper, and the director who will lead us into episode 10, 11, and 12. Rabies and Germs, welcome to the Mishmash Podcast. I'm Nicholas McConaughey, here alongside Scott Moore, and for today's edition, we'll be talking about The Last Jedi. And if you haven't already seen, we have also talked about Rogue One in a previous video, as well as Star Wars The Force Awakens.
So here is another warning that if you have not yet watched Episode 8, take a step back, go watch our Episode 7 video, also our Rogue One video, and then go watch Star Wars in theaters. But make sure you watch our videos first because they're much more important. Then go watch that in the movie theaters. Come back. First thing you do is click upon our YouTube video. All right.
Yeah, so don't look at anybody's reviews because right now Rotten Tomatoes has a 50% audience score right now. I guess that people are, people that downright hate Star Wars movies, anti-Starries as they're being called,
it's
are
actually anti-feminist. That's what I heard. It's anti-feminists are so mad that they're so mad right now that Rey is the main character.
I heard it was like a criticism against social justice warriors, and I don't
Right,
understand
that's the whole feminist thing, because they're saying that, and we're going to trail off here into a second, but they're saying that Rey is a Mary Sue. In movie terms or in book terms, that
like
a woman,
perfect.
Right, she's too perfect. She can just do all these things. But what they're not thinking about, again, is what I talked about.
Luke was a Mary Sue.
Luke was a Mary Sue.
Luke was a Gary Sue.
Right, he was a Gary Sue. He did the exact same things that she is doing. Although I'll talk about it a little bit during our discussion. She may be a little too powerful, and I agree with that, but not for the reasons that people are saying. I don't care that she started using the Force without training. Luke started using the Force without training. I don't care about that. What I do care about is some of the smaller things that I saw, and I'm just sitting there like, maybe that shouldn't have happened.
And something interesting about this is, whereas before, whenever we talked about the Star Wars movies, we had already discussed it prior, because of course Star Wars The Force Awakens is now 2 years old. Rogue One came out, I think, last year. We had discussed it, whereas I don't know if it was a mutual decision without us even discussing it, but you and I have not really discussed anything about Episode 8, so we don't really have our thoughts, or we don't know where our standings are on this movie.
I didn't ask you yesterday when I saw you on purpose, because I wanted to come into this and just be like, you know what, I'll figure out what his opinion is, because I know what my opinion is, and honestly, it wasn't as strong while I was sitting there watching it, but as soon as I got out to the car, I was like, you know what? This is it. And then it started flooding out, and as I was driving back home, because I actually watched it with our other brother, and as I'm driving back home, I just realized that I am tearing this thing to shreds. And I didn't even hate it. I recommended it to people, and I didn't even hate it, but I tore it to shreds.
What's funny is my girlfriend Becca, she goes and we watch The Force Awakens. She liked The Force Awakens. We didn't see that one in theaters. We actually watched it just 2 days ago, so it was fresh in our minds. She liked that film. We went and watched Rogue One. In January of this year, we went and watched Rogue One. She walked out of it. She liked it a lot. And the thing is, with me, I don't like to consider myself cynical, because I go into these movies and I try to have an open mind, but it just doesn't compute a lot of the times. So whenever I watched Rogue One, she liked it a lot. I thought to myself, like, ugh. And whenever I watched The Force Awakens, I liked it. I didn't absolutely love it. Whenever we walked out of the theater for episode 8, she was like, okay, it was a disappointment. And she was like, it was 30 minutes too long. She's like, didn't like it. And she liked it. I've been making fun of her because she doesn't normally hate things. But I was like, I don't have much of a problem with it. I have some problems with it, but they're mostly my problems with Star Wars as a whole. And I feel like I've been bouncing it back and forth between whether or not I like episode 7 or 8 more. And so I was hoping in the middle of this discussion after to hear your thoughts on it, whether or not you could poke holes and sway me one way or the other. But yeah, it's rare for me not to be the one that is like going, nope. Not this.
So I agree with her, and I told you previously, just as a brief discussion we had while we were sitting here getting the microphone and everything set up, was that whenever I went into the theater, there was a lot of people in there, and the only seats open were the front 2 rows of the seats, and I had to sit all the way to the side in the front row, so I'm at an angle that is horrible, and I told you that maybe I didn't think the movie was as long, or maybe it wasn't as long as I thought it was, but I was so uncomfortable that I was like, man, this movie is forever. So to hear that she also said that it was 30 minutes too long, I thought that it was about 30 minutes too long as well.
Like, just to make sure that I get it right, I think her exact perspective is, and I thought it was kind of too long as well, but I think what her point is that it should have ended 30 minutes before, because she thought that they could have ended it at some points during that, like, she thought it was going to end and it didn't, and she thought it
don't know that there was never a definitive ending, but there was definitely parts in there that could have been taken out that I was really bored at.
But, like, I was lucky, because whenever I've seen the Star Wars movies, I usually go, like, I'm not one of those people that is running to the theater, especially not for Star Wars films, because they're not the go-to, even for film series that I love, even for ones that I really, really want to see. I don't go and see them the day of. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like it whenever there is a bunch of kids meshing with their popcorn, and, like, people drinking out of their soda pop, and like old guy going like, where are we gonna see it? I don't enjoy that. But
I love how your
I got Southern
old man was, he was definitely Southern old man.
So whenever I saw Star Wars The Force Awakens, it was like January 15th. There was only, like, I'm fairly certain it was me and the person I went with. Whenever I saw Rogue One, there was perhaps 5 people. And whenever we saw The Last Jedi most recently, I actually got a pretty good seat, my ideal seat as a matter of fact, because we were the first people in there. It was just a full house whenever it started, because we go there 30 minutes early. But, yeah, so I didn't have that problem.
So, we're going to go ahead and jump into this. So, we're going to go ahead and answer some questions about The Last Jedi, and I think that will entice some of the more of the conversation. So, Star Wars Force Awakens definitely left us with a plethora of questions. What it was is to really keep us tided over until the Last Jedi came out, which they knew was going to be a 2-year sequence. So now the Last Jedi has hit the screens, what questions did it really answer for us? So the major question, I think, or one of the major questions, I don't know that it was probably one of the most popular. It was 1, 2. Who are Rey's parents?
Yeah, I think I think it was definitely one of the main questions that people were asking, is who's Rey's parents were. There were a lot of theories going around, which we talked about in The Force Awakens.
So maybe it was definitely, if you went on to like forums or boards or things like that, it was definitely one of the most talked about. It was 1 of 2, and the other one that I think was maybe a little bit more popular, we'll get into it in just a second, but there were theories all over the place, from her being the daughter of Leia and Han, which we talked about in episode 7, wouldn't have made sense after the movie ended. So I think that one should have just been scratched, but a lot of people were still thinking maybe.
And they were definitely trying to make people think Luke. It was like a deliberate effort, I believe.
Right, and like
even in the trailers, they were doing things like the Force has always been strong in the Skywalker family and something like that, and then they'd show Rey, and it was specifically trying to make you think, and like I said, Mark Hamill in discussions and interviews was egging it on as well, so they were definitely having some fun with it.
Right, and so, like I said, we also heard that she may have been Qui-Gon Jinn's Obi-Wan Kenobi, but at the end of the day, in a heartfelt moment between Kylo Ren and Rey, we find out that they were nothing but junkie junkers.
And I don't know about you, but whenever I left the theater, that was one of my girlfriend's main criticisms. She was very, very disappointed with that, whereas I thought that was fantastic.
I liked it.
I like that a lot.
That was not one of my qualms with the movie. I liked it. I did not want her to be Luke's daughter
and I loved Kylo Ren's very awkward way of saying it. Like, yeah, they were nothing. They were trash. Sold you for milk money. And
you have no part in this story.
You have no part. You were nothing, but not to me. And
I think that really helped with the connection between those two characters, which is going to develop more probably in episode 9. We're going to figure out what in the world is going to happen. But I really liked it. I did not want her to be Han and Leia's.
Yeah, because I didn't want it to, and I was afraid. I know that they want it to rhyme, they want it to go together, and they want it to have connections, but I don't think that they need it. There was a Q&A with Daisy Ridley talking about it, and I think she hit it on the head, is everybody asks, who are you related to? Everybody asks what the connection is with each character, they want to know, was Finn related to this person, which doesn't matter. No. But they always ask, who is this person connected to? Because they need it to be connected to someone familiar, because they want to compare those people, and they want someone familiar. And I'm like, no.
It's definitely a family story, all the way up from Anakin.
But I want it to be who is Rey's character? She's Rey. And I want that to be who she is. I don't want them to be carrying it off. I don't want her to be Rey Skywalker. I want her to be Rey, and I want you to love her because she is a good character, and I think that's what they should do, and that's the approach that they should take, and I like that.
So, the second question that I have here, and I don't know that this one was as much talked about, but I wanted to separate the two bigger ones, and so it was probably talked about a little bit, and it was rumored and speculated about for almost probably ever since the movie ended. Would Kylo Ren be the one to change? Now, Kylo was clearly the apprentice of Snoke, who was the main villain, much like the Emperor in the first wave of films. However, Kylo had a hard time following the path of his predecessor, Darth Vader. So he kind of showed that sympathy whenever he was on the bridge with Han. In this movie, he also shows a little bit more, but we'll go into that when we answer the question. He was whiny, angsty, and even some felt weak in the Force because of his kind of quick to temper, smashing things, punching things. He did. He had temper tantrums. And going into The Last Jedi, one would have assumed that we would have found ourselves really delving into Kylo Ren and finding out why he was the way he was. And while we did, in many ways, it never really answered the main question. Is Kylo a good guy trapped in a bad situation, or a bad guy with hints of a conscience?
I think it does answer it, is the thing. I think that is the best aspect about The Last Jedi was the dynamic between Rey and between Kylo Ren. I thought that they were very, very good together, and that was the part that I was interested in more than anything else, is I loved it whenever they were just talking back and forth, and the thing is, I was so excited because I was so convinced just for a little while, and I knew that they wouldn't do it, but I wanted them to so much, and it was seen whenever Luke Skywalker was having Rey meditate, which by the way was hilarious to me, is whenever she was just he's like, reach out, and she reached out, and he's like, oh, the Force must be really powerful in you, and he's like that might be one of my favorite moments in the entire movie, is just because it was so silly, but she goes straight into the darkness and doesn't try to pull away from it, and I thought maybe that this could be the movie where, because I don't think they take risks, and that's my biggest issue, my biggest problem with Star Wars as a whole, is they're very, very simple, romanticized. It's hope, 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 hope. And I thought that the dynamic between Kylo Ren and Rey was very, very good. And what I wanted more than anything to see happen was I wanted, and I knew it wouldn't be a permanent change, but with the scene involving them where it was revealed who Rey's parents were, more than anything, I just wanted Rey and them to join forces. I knew it wouldn't happen, but I thought, wow, it would be great if they joined forces. It would be a completely new dynamic, and although Rey would maintain she is good, he would be still on a spectrum of sorts where it's not necessarily clear whether he's good or bad. And I thought that I really wanted them to do that, and I thought that would have been great. But of course they didn't. They didn't do that, and you said that it wasn't clear whether he was good or bad. I think it's clear where he falls is like as an anti-hero, not really because he's not a protagonist, but because he falls somewhere in the middle. He's neutral. I think one of my favorite speeches in that movie, or it was more like his temper tantrum, where he's like, "You're still holding on to these labels, these things, like no more Jedis, no more of this, the Sith, and all this." And like start anew. And I feel like it was actually almost worked as a payoff from The Force Awakens, because it feels like they were all following this these clear parallels. History was starting to repeat itself, and he downright just wants to be the wrench in the entire thing, and he wants to deter it and start his own thing anew. And it's not necessarily that he's evil, but he's certainly not good, and he's confused. He is conflicted.
Right, and I think that's where the movie ends. Is that I don't know that it ever answers that question, because he's very confused at the beginning of the movie. He's very confused at the end. He reminds me of. Do you know what a gray Jedi is?
Yes, it's a lot of people were saying that Luke was going to be one of the gray Jedis.
Right. Yeah. So the idea that we went in with was that maybe Luke was going to be a gray Jedi, but it turns out that maybe Kylo Ren is the gray Jedi, or at least the beginning of the gray Jedi, and I think that could be. A good spin-off into the end of it, if that's how they continue to go in 9, is that he just decided to converge on the Force and just be the middle ground. He is the balance. And that would be cool. Like, it was like the beginning of, we find out how the Grey Jedi actually started. And at least in canon, I mean, there's books all across the world about that. But at least in canon movies, you could find out where the Grey Jedi started. And I think that's what is right now, is the Grey Jedi. Or at least he's so confused that he doesn't know what he is. And so, I mean, he's apt to kill Snoke, but he also is wanting to make sure that he doesn't blow up his mom. Like, he doesn't blow up Leia. He feels bad. He said he never hated Han. Like, he didn't hate Han. He said, I didn't hate my dad. He says that in the movie, that he didn't hate him. He just killed him. Because it was time to let go of the past. It was time to let go. He wasn't there anymore.
I feel like in this movie, this is the first time where I downright like Kylo Ren. I didn't like him in the Force Awakens. I didn't like him from the very second he took his mask off. And a part of it is kind of rude, because I'm like, it's because of Adam Driver's face. It's like he takes off his mask. I'm like, you look like an angsty teen who just like
Have you seen the meme that if you face swap Driver and Keanu Reeves, that it's the same face? Like, have you seen that yet?
He like, but the thing is, Kylo Ren, or at least Keanu Reeves. At least Keanu Reeves has especially when he has a beard. And that's what he needs to do. That's what Kylo Ren needs to do. Is he needs to get on
a villain beard.
He needs a villain beard. He would look so much better. He doesn't look very threatening. He looks like a. He doesn't look menacing at all. He looks like an angsty teen.
I would talk about that with you, but I really want to hit on this later, because there is something that I really want to say on Kylo Ren, and it's not here yet. It's not in this part of the discussion, because I really want to elaborate on it, but I also don't want to take over that is Kylo Ren a good guy or a bad guy. I want to talk about it more so whenever we get into a different part of the discussion, but like I said, I don't think that it answered the question. It just elongated the question, hopefully to be answered in 9. Which a lot of people say is the same thing about Ren's parents, or Rey's parents. It's really hard to have two names that are so close together in the same story, and I think that's why a lot of writers kind of try to drift away from that. But Ren and Rey, really close, and now I keep on messing them up. I'm horrible with names anyways. So Whenever we think about it, though, I don't think that the two main questions... I think that the main question was answered about Rey's parents. I believe that that's the truth. A lot of people are like...
I hope so. That's what I want.
A lot of people are like, that's just to throw us off, and it was Kylo. But she felt it, too. She touched the Force, and she felt that he wasn't, guiding her down a path.